Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely fascinating, honestly pretty grim piece of folklore. And to really do it justice, I'm going to step into a very specific role for our time together. I'll be speaking to you from the detached, quiet vantage point of the monastic warden, a silent observer standing out in the wasteland. Through my eyes, we're going to walk through a dark theatrical tragedy about the collapse of absolute logic and the terrifying descent of the captain. Because ultimately, this is a story about what happens when human confidence hits its absolute maximum peak, only to completely shatter into oblivion. Picture this. Watching from the wasteland, I observed a builder. He constructed what he proudly called a glass fortress. Now, this was a man utterly convinced that his soul was perfect, right? He thought his logic was absolutely flawless and his engineering impenetrable. But standing out here in the dust, looking right through those transparent walls, I didn't see a finished masterpiece. Not at all. I saw the messy draft of arrogant Victorian certainty. He really believed he had conquered the unknown, but in reality, he had just put himself on display. So let's start with Act 1, the fragile glass fortress. Our architect truly believed the universe was just a giant, predictable, mechanical clockwork. To him, everything was governed by this divine order, and he stood proudly at what we need to define as the zenith of rationality. Now, this is an absolutely crucial concept. The zenith isn't just a high point, it's a towering precipice of logic. It is the exact threshold where human certainty reaches its absolute maximum limit, and ironically, it's exactly where it's most primed to shatter. He really thought that by standing at the zenith, completely shielded by the logical, transparent walls of his own making, he was safe from the shadows of the world. But here is the profound, tragic irony of it all. To protect this grand sanctuary, the architect lit lighthouses and oil lamps. He thought, they'd cast away the darkness and keep his fortress safe. But out in the wasteland, light doesn't just illuminate, it acts as a beacon. Those lamps didn't protect him, they actually became markers of vulnerability. They literally signaled his exact location to the abyss. And because of that, his supposedly impenetrable glass fortress shattered, right at its highest point, completely collapsing under the weight of the very unknown he thought he had banished. Which brings us to Act 2, the inverted compass. Think about our protagonist, now taking the form of a voyager. We can trace how this arrogant certainty leads straight to his tragic descent. As long as he was looking up at the mechanical precision of the literal zenith of the stars above, he felt totally secure. But the timeline of his hubris is inevitable. The moment he hit that peak, the zenith of rationality, he suddenly found himself teetering on a precipice of logic. And at this exact threshold, a total shift in navigation kicked in. The laws of the sky literally demanded a change. He was no longer permitted to look up at the morning star for guidance. Instead, he was forced downward, plunging straight into the darkness. Completely stripped of the stars, the Voyager was handed a new, haunting purpose. His compass actually physically inverted. It wasn't pointing towards prosperous trade routes or physical goods anymore. No, the needle locked directly onto the bottomless memory of the deep. He was forced to abandon the quiet logic of the heavens and navigate entirely through the chaotic noise of his own guilt. It's wild. The very tools he once used to master the world now served only to map his own internal ruin. Moving right along to Act 3, the decaying skeletal vessel. Here, the narrative perspective shifts to a merchant, and we witness the terrifying physical transformation that happens when the laws of the sky demand this kind of descent. It's a harsh lesson in what happens when the star forgets the sky. Look at the stark dichotomy here. On one hand, you have the proud vessel, crafted of polished oak and shining brass, the ultimate mirror of human engineering and the illusion of impenetrable shields. But then, you have the decayed reality. The merchant learned the hard way that once an object reaches its zenith, it has to begin descending. His magnificent ship was stripped of every ounce of its luster, decaying and reconstituting into this skeletal form, bound in hollowed servitude to the deep. This horrific transformation, it's known as the purification through subtraction. The merchant realized, way too late, of course, that his trusted starlight offered zero salvation. The zenith of rationality was never meant to be a destination of peace. It was just the turning point where his human logic completely gave out, ushering him into a steep descent toward necrotic finality. That beautiful fortress of glass, it just became a skeletal ship of bone and rot. And finally, we arrive at Act 4, the synthesis of the Grim Collector. This is where the shattered architect, the blinded voyager, and the sunken merchant all synthesize into one single, tragic figure. the servant of the abyss. To really grasp his final state, we have to define his new burden, which is the ledger of regret. Totally stripped of his former logic and that shining brass, his entire existence is now measured by this ledger. It's an endless, agonizingly meticulous task where he literally has to record every single shard of his ruined delusion, every failed certainty, and every forbidden impulse. He's essentially become a grim agent of the deep, a universal collector feeding an insatiable memory. His shift in navigation is totally complete. He's now managing the spiritual refuse and existential decay of the world. And honestly, in doing so, he's become a dark reflection of me. He meticulously mirrors my own duties as the monastic warden, tracking the exact impulses he once thought he was entirely above. He finally understands that his beautiful glass fortress was never actually a sanctuary. It was just a carefully curated stage for his own inevitable ruin. So what should we take away from all of this? The captain remains a ghost of his former logic, serving as a permanent warning to us all. He proves that at the absolute peak of human certainty, you aren't invincible. In fact, you're the most exposed you will ever be. So as I watch your messy drafts from the wasteland, I want to leave you with this one provocative thought. When you build your own fortresses of logic, and when you finally reach your own zenith of rationality, what shadows are you unknowingly inviting in?